Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Stephanie, your double board certified critical care physician who helps physicians who are struggling with their jobs, burnt out with their careers, or who just want some career advice through my books, webinars, professional speaking, and professional career coaching for physicians. I help physicians discover alternative jobs and careers in medicine so they can practice medicine on their own terms. Welcome to the Creating Careers in Medicine group. I call you guys my CCM doctors, not because we're critical care doctors, but because CCM, we're creating careers in medicine, and we focus on resuscitating careers, infusing people with the love and passion to practice medicine again on their own terms, and reviving dreams. So tonight in our Facebook group, we are going to have a discussion about 5 things that you need to do before you quit your job. Last night we talked about 10 questions to ask yourself to determine whether or not you need to get a new job. And tonight, and I told you guys after we had these extensive conversations, I was like, do not go and submit your resignation today talking about Dr. Stephanie told you to quit your job, because there are certain things that you need to do. After you've made the decision to leave your current position, there are certain things that you must do to make sure you have a smooth transition. The first thing that you need to do before you do anything after you've decided to leave your job is you need to read your contract. Before submitting your resignation, please be sure to read your contract and read it thoroughly. And if you're not good with contracts and legal terms, please get a lawyer to look over the contract with you and go over the contract line by line. You should have done this prior to signing the contract, but even now that you are thinking about resigning from your position, this is extremely important because you have to know certain things. First of all, you have to know how much notice you must give. So you've got to find the termination portion, the termination clause portion of your contract, and read how much notice you must give before leaving, whether or not you have to give a 30, 60, or 90-day notice. You also need to know how your notice is to be delivered. Can you email it? Does it have to be sent to a certified letter? If so, to whom? What address do you have to mail it to? Things of that nature, and that should all be spelled out in your contract. If you resign from your job, is it specified in your contract that you must resign from the hospitals where you have privileges? Because a lot of times, we resign from the permanent job and thinking that we can stay on with keep our hospital privileges and maybe stay on with the employer and pick up some PRN shifts, but that may not be the case. So your contract may require that once you resign from that job, that you resign from the medical staff of all the hospitals that you work at while you are employed at that current job. You also need to know, and this is huge, and this has caught a lot of people by surprise, and this also caught me by surprise when I resigned from one of my jobs. You have to know whether or not there's any money you have to pay back. This is huge because a lot of contracts specify that if you leave the job before the contract is up, that you may have to pay back things like moving expenses, sign-on bonuses, loan repayment. For those people that were in fellowship and started getting a stipend from a particular employer while they're in fellowship, you may have to pay that money back as well too if you leave before the contract is over. So you have to read your contract thoroughly to understand what monies you may have to pay back once you leave. The other thing is this is huge as well. You also need to find out who is responsible for paying your malpractice tail insurance, and that should also be specified in the contract because, like I said, you don't want any surprises. You've already made the decision to leave the job, you've already decided to resign, and you've submitted your letter of resignation, but now you do not want to get a letter from your employer saying that you need to purchase a malpractice tail policy, and it's going to cost you anywhere from $30, $40, $50, $60, sometimes $100,000 depending on your specialty. You don't want to be caught by surprise, and you want to be planning for these types of things as well. The other thing that your contract has to specify, and you must know this when you're thinking about resigning, is do you have a no-compete clause? And what are the terms of the no-compete clause? Is it, a 6-month no-compete, a 1-year no-compete? Is it 2 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles, 50-mile radius? That's very important as well also. And like I said, these are things that hopefully you read about before you sign the contract. But even if you didn't, it's a good idea to go back over this so you know exactly what the process needs to be and exactly the things that you can expect upon submitting your resignation. The other thing that's really a good idea for you to do before you quit your job is to have another job. This should go without saying. You really should have a contract signed or a letter of intent signed before you submit your resignation, because we all know that obtaining employment as a physician is a tedious and a time-consuming process. And you really need to give yourself a minimum of 3 months. It could take as long as 6 or 12 months in some circumstances, depending on how long it takes your state licensure to come through. The credentialing and privileging process takes a long time. So kind of have another job before you make the decision to leave. Sign contract, letter of intent. If you don't have another permanent job in place, at least have some locums assignments that are ready to go once you work your last day, because you really want to minimize interruptions in your income, because like I said, it takes a long time for us to get a job. And if you plan on opening your own practice, so that's why you're leaving, and you're not going to get a permanent job and you're not going to do locums because you're going to work in your own practice, hopefully you have enough money saved up so that you won't hit any financial challenges while you're waiting for your practice to get off the ground. So basically, to have not a contingency plan, but just to make sure that you have the other plan that's well in process so that you can have as smooth a transition between leaving this job and going on to your next opportunity. The other thing that you need to do probably after you submit your resignation, is to talk to Human Resources in the payroll department, because there's a couple of things that you need to check on. You need to see whether or not you're due any money, any unpaid bonuses that you're due, unused vacation. I know for one of the jobs that I left, I never took vacation because we worked a 7 on, 7 off. So I always just, hey, Dr. Menza, how are you? I always took vacation through my work schedule. So when I left the job, they had to pay me for my unused vacation, and they had to pay me for whatever bonuses that I got. So the third thing you need to do before you quit your job or right after you submit your resignation is to talk to Human Resources in the payroll department to see if there's any money that they owe you, because you want to get all the bonuses that you deserve. If they pay out your unused vacation, sick leave, PTO, things of that nature, you want to be sure you get that money. You also need to, once again, determine how much, if you have to pay your malpractice tail insurance, how much it's going to cost and to whom to make the check out to, because like I said, you don't want any surprises. You don't want any certified letters from your prior employer saying, you owe us this money. You want no surprises. You also need to find out when your benefits expire. So if you have health insurance, you need to figure out the last day of your health insurance, whether or not you are eligible for COBRA, and going towards your new job, if it's a permanent job and you're going to be participating in the employer-sponsored benefits. You need to find out when your insurance kicks in that next job, because you want to minimize any gaps in coverage. You want to find out from your employer, from Human Resources, what is the process for rolling over your 401k. You also want to see whether or not you can keep the life insurance policy if you need it, that your current employer has, and you just pay the premiums yourself, which is something that I did. And it might be even worth asking if you can do the same with your disability insurance policy as well too. So before you leave the job, you need to check with Human Resources and payroll to make sure you're not owed any money. Make sure they don't owe you money for unused PTO, vacation, or sick leave. To see how your benefits, what's the expiration date on your benefits, and whether or not you can roll over certain benefits like your 401k. So those are very important as well too, because like I said, your goal is when you're leaving a job and going to another job is to make sure your transition is as smooth as possible and you take advantage of everything you can take advantage of. The fourth thing that you need to ask yourself, the fourth thing that you need to do before you leave your job is after you've submitted your resignation and you've given notice, you have to make sure either you or your practice, especially if you have your own private panel of patients on an outpatient basis, you need to notify your patients in plenty of time so that they can obtain coverage, so they can establish care with a new provider, so that they have the opportunities to establish care with somebody else, to get their medical records with somebody else, because failure to do this could have you be at risk for patient abandonment. And I do know physicians who have gotten in trouble for that, and that is the very reason why you never, ever, 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 ever walk off a job as a physician, because it is not only having somebody to do the work for you, you can always get in trouble for abandoning patients. So you always want to make sure you give your employer plenty of notice, that you give them enough time so that they can provide coverage, and that you give your employer plenty of notice so that you can notify your patients in a timely manner, so that care can be established with another provider, because you never want to be accused of patient abandonment, because that is reportable to the state board. And the fifth thing that you want to do after you make the decision to leave your job and after you submit your resignation is you want to make the best of the time that you have left. I have been in situations after I've submitted my resignation, and those 30, 60, or 90 days could seem like a lifetime, but I tell you that this is the time that you really have to be on your best behavior. You do not want to go to work with this take this job and shove it attitude, because the last impression that they have of you is the impression that they're going to carry with you, and you have to know that every future employer is going to contact your current and your past employers. And for this reason, I have seen physicians who have left jobs on bad terms, who have said some unkind things to hospital administrators and their bosses. I have seen these physicians not be able to get employment, because people call people. It's a small world, it's a small medical community, and people read between the lines. So if a question is asked, would you hire this this physician again, and you give a less than stellar response, the person that's asking the question may put two and two together. So you always want to leave your job on the best terms. You never want to just have a sour attitude the last days when you're working out your notice. And this leads to a point of, what do you actually say in your resignation letter? You need to be as positive as you can possibly be. This is not the time to tell them what you really think about themselves, because you're leaving. They know that there's reason that you're leaving. You don't have to go into details. You don't have to talk about how unhappy you are. Usually the best things you need to do is you need to thank your current employer for the opportunity to work with them, and tell them that you are leaving to pursue other opportunities or to spend more time with family, just something like that. But you want to leave on a positive, upbeat note. You don't want to tell anybody that how unhappy you are because you haven't been able to do this or haven't been able to do that, or you don't think the hospital is run well. You don't want to do that. So you always want to leave on a positive note. And like I said earlier, you never ever 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 want to walk off the job. You never don't just want to not show up to work. You don't want to not work out the terms of your notice unless it is something that is agreed mutually by you and your employer, because you don't want to give them the opportunity to accuse you of patient abandonment. So those are 5 things that you really need to do after you make the decision to leave, because like I said, the decision to leave a job and get another job can be very stressful, but you want to make sure you have a smooth transition. So just to recap, you want to read your contract before you submit your letter of resignation. You want to know what your termination clause states, how much notice you have to give, whether there's any money that has to be signed, has to be given back. And for those people who've never signed a contract before, just so you know, if a lot of contracts stipulate that if you leave the job before the terms of the contract have ended, that you might have to pay back your sign-in bonus, relocation expenses, loan repayment, stipends, things of that nature. So, you can be on the hook for $30, $40, $50 plus $1,000 if you walk away from a job, depending on what your contract states. You also want to know whether or not you have to cover your malpractice tail insurance policy, and you want to know how much that is. And for the surgical specialties, it can be in the hundreds, $100,000. I've heard of colleagues that have had to purchase malpractice tail policies in that amount of money. You don't want to be surprised at the end of your contract to know that you're on the hook for that kind of thing. You also want to know whether or not you have a no-compete clause and what the terms of the no-compete clause are. So the first thing you need to do is to read that contract and read it very carefully. Before you leave a job, have another job. If not, have at least a signed contract, a signed letter of intent, have some locums work or a plan. If you're starting your own practice, have enough money saved up so that you can cover your living expenses for 3 to 6 months until your business gets off the ground. Make sure you talk to Human Resources and Payroll to make sure that you get paid. If the contract stipulates that if you have any bonuses that are due to you, quarterly bonuses, yearly bonuses that are due to you, whether or not you are due to be paid out for PTO, unused vacation time, sick leave, things of that nature. Find out when your benefits expire with your new job. Find out when your benefits kick in and just see whether or not you're going to have a gap in coverage. Make sure you give enough notice so that your job can give your patients enough notice so that they can establish care with a new provider. And like I say, make the best out of the time you have left on your job after you submit your resignation when you're working out your notice, because you do not want to leave on a bad note. With that being said, I do thank you all for joining us this evening in our Creating Careers in Medicine group. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post it in the comments. I do have my locums ebook that is available for free download. I do preach the benefits of locums tenens because it is a good source to have income on a fairly short notice, on a short-term or temporary basis, and it gives you the option of not having to make full commitments to any kind of permanent employment opportunity. Kind of gives you some breathing room. So I've included a locums ebook available for download that will give you some good, concise guidance on doing locum tenens. Thank you all for joining me. If you have any questions, just message me or put them in our Facebook page, and I will see you shortly. Thanks. Bye-bye.